Have you ever had a moment where you suddenly realized you're not the same person you used to be? Not because something dramatic happened, not because you reached some huge milestone in your life, but because life quietly showed you who you've already become. That happened to me recently. I was at a retreat with about 22 women, and at one point, I caught myself thinking, I don't want today to end. And that probably doesn't sound like a big deal, but for me, it was. Because people don't always know they're surviving until they accidentally spend a weekend living. I went into the weekend thinking I just needed a break, time away, time to recharge. I wasn't expecting anything life changing, but I laughed more than I have in a long time. I tried my first cold plunge. I rode around on a golf cart all through the woods. I climbed hay bales. I dressed up for a murder mystery dinner as the maiden of the secret garden. Half of me represented the earth and the other half represented the woman. How fitting was that for me? This whole weekend was playful. It was ridiculous. It was fun. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I stopped performing. I wasn't Donna the author. I wasn't Donna the healer. I wasn't Donna the employee. I wasn't Donna managing Crohn's disease. I was just Donna. And I honestly don't know how long it's been since I experienced myself in that way. When I came home, I expected to feel grateful for the memories. Instead, I came home with something I didn't expect, awareness. And I realized something. Sometimes we don't notice healing while it's happening. We notice it when life gives us something to compare it against. That retreat became a reference point for me. It wasn't that it changed me, it showed me that I already did. For the first time, I could clearly see the difference between who I used to be and who I had quietly become. And that realization stopped me in my tracks because I think we misunderstand healing. Most of us think healing is going to feel dramatic. We imagine waking up one morning and suddenly becoming confident, suddenly loving all of ourselves, suddenly having perfect boundaries, suddenly never getting triggered again, suddenly having the perfect environment to create this perfect life I want for myself. Like healing is some finish line that we cross. But has that ever happened for you? Now, I'm not talking about an aha moment. That is a profound mental shift that uplevels you. But that big change is what I'm talking about here, when your mind, body, emotional, and spiritual self all align at once. It hasn't happened that way for me. Transformation didn't arrive like fireworks. It shifted something in me. It happened quietly, one boundary at a time, one conversation, one moment of self-trust at a time. Until one day I looked back and I realized today's version of me would have never recognized the woman who first learned how to survive. I don't think healing feels dramatic. I think healing feels ordinary. Maybe you've healed more than you realize. We think healing feels like becoming someone else. I think Healing feels like recognizing someone you've already become. Here's something I've been thinking about a lot since I came home. What if your body enters a new phase while your identity is still living in the previous one? Think about that. Your nervous system begins to soften. Your reactions change over time. You stop apologizing so much. You start saying no every once in a while. You trust yourself just a little bit more. Joy starts showing up again. But you're still introducing yourself as the anxious one, people pleaser, the broken one, the sick one, the one who's always overwhelmed. The conditions changed, but your identity never got the memo. And I wonder how many of us are living in that space. Now, I want to be really clear here. Healing didn't erase my Crohn's disease, my anxiety, my bad back, the things that have stopped me from living before. In fact, I had a Crohn's symptom during the retreat, and a few years ago, that would have been the end. Would have ruined the rest of my weekend, and I would have panicked. I would have assumed the whole experience was over. And if I'm being honest, I would have just canceled the rest of my plans. That's my go-to move. But this time I noticed something different. My diagnosis didn't change. My relationship with it had. Instead of fear, there was curiosity. Instead of panic, there was patience. And I realized something. Healing hadn't made me physically healthy. Healing taught me how to live with my whole self. And that's very different. I really didn't want the weekend to end. That thought stayed with me long after the retreat was over. I kept asking myself, why did that moment affect me so deeply? And the answer surprised me. Because normally when I have empty space, my mind starts looking for what's next. What's on my to-do list? What should I accomplish today? What should I fix? Who should I become? But for one afternoon, I was simply where I already was. I wasn't waiting until I was healthier. I wasn't becoming more disciplined, more productive, more healed. I was just living. And that's when it hit me. I had built a life that was very good at surviving. And now I'm learning how to build one that I don't want to escape. Those are two very different things. I also want to say something that feels really important here. Survival isn't bad. Survival saved me. It got me through depression. It got me through binge eating. It got me through addiction. It got me through grief. It got me through countless surgeries and procedures. It got me through chronic illness. It got me here, and I am grateful for it. But I don't think survival was ever supposed to become my identity or my personality. Survival strategies are meant to protect us in the moment. They were never meant to define us. So now I'm asking myself a different question. Not who do I need to become, but where am I still protecting a version of myself that no longer needs so much protection? That's a very different question. Maybe the conditions have already changed for you. Maybe your body already knows something that your identity hasn't caught up to yet. There's a version of you that learned how to survive. Honor them, love them, thank them They got you here, but they don't have to keep carrying all the weight. Healing begins when you realize that the version of you who needed so much protection isn't the same version of you living your life today. Your awareness didn't create your healing, it revealed it. And if this conversation resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Where have you noticed your healing before your mind caught up? You think behavior versus thought. And if you're ready to become more aware of the quiet ways you've already been changing, I'd love to invite you into my course, Awareness Changes Everything. Because awareness isn't the destination, it's the doorway.